Ladies and gentlemen, today's Friday, Full Auto Friday. Friday, Full Auto Friday. Is that correct? Today's Q&A is brought to you by Onnit, the longest-standing sponsor of the podcast. They were actually my first podcast sponsor. Can't appreciate them enough. Onnit.com/hot is going to be your landing page for total human optimization. You're going to see three things mainly on the landing page, three graphics: Alpha Brain, Fitness, and Total Gut Health. Alpha Brain is their flagship product. It's a nootropic for helping individuals support memory, focus, and processing speed. Fitness speaks for itself. There's a bunch of equipment. And the Total Gut Health is everything you're going to need to optimize your gut health: digestive enzymes, prebiotics, probiotics, and betaine HCI. If you want to look beyond that, at the very top of the page, supplements, nutrition, fitness, apparel, sale, and content. Dedicate some time once you have everything in your life dialed in: sleep, recovery, food, all that good stuff. Then dial in on the micro. So if you're interested in doing that and you're ready to commit to taking your performance as high as you can get it, onnit.com/hot. This episode is also brought to you by Christensen Arms. What's their claim to fame? Well, a couple things, but they are the original creators of the carbon fiber rifle barrel, and they're makers of the lightest and most accurate rifles in the industry. I have a suite or a fleet. I don't even know what is the correct term. I'm going to call it a fleet. It goes back to my naval heritage of their firearms. I actually just added one of their 6.5 Creedmoor rifles to my fleet because I get asked about that caliber all the time, and I actually have no experience with it. Just finished sighting that thing in because I have an upcoming mule deer hunt, which I'm going to use the 6.5 Creedmoor, and that thing is an absolute tack driver. Suppressed, of course, because I'm a gentleman. If you want to check out the weapons, the armory that they have available of rifles, go to christensenarms.com. Now, some people are listening to this and they don't know where to start, and that's okay. Christensen understands that. They want to make it easy for you to find the perfect rifle without the hassle of hours of research and gun jargon. That's why they created the Find My Firearm tool. It's a short questionnaire that's going to match you with the firearm that will meet your needs. Take that quiz at christensenarms.com/findmyfirearm, or go to christensenarms.com, which will allow you to look through everything, and then you're going to find a link directly to the Find My Firearm tool on that page. And that's it. Let's dive into this. Full Auto Friday 78.
Okay, got the red smoke. Gun run, north or south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke. Okay, copy, west of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now. Come on with it, baby, give it to me, I need it. You're cleared hot. Copy, cleared hot.
Three questions for today, ladies and gentlemen. Let's dive right in. This one comes from Australia. I witnessed something this week and have been struggling with it over the past few days. I was at uni, which I'm going to assume means the university, one afternoon and saw two guys steal a push bike. One of the guys was standing watch while the other cut the chain lock with a set of side cutters. This shit was in plain sight. I couldn't believe it. At first, I thought about going over and confronting the two, but then all of these thoughts flood into my mind regarding the possible outcomes. I train jiu-jitsu and feel confident enough to handle one individual if it went that way. Two, however, could get a bit fucking dicey, and the side cutters could be a real problem. My brain then went to, so you control one of them and the other runs away, which is the best case scenario. But then you're walking to the bus later and I get jumped by this dude and his boys. In the end, I essentially watched two guys commit theft and did nothing. Not a single fucking thing. Now, all I can think about is this poor cunt whose bike it was, coming back after a shit day of getting butt raped studying for exams just to find out that some little fucker with the intellect of a smashed cucumber has taken their only mode of transport. Pretty much, I feel like a coward. I guess I'm reaching out because I consider you to be a very capable guy, and I'm just wondering at what point you decide to intervene in something like this. Do you all also find yourself weighing up these situations, or are you confident that you could control the situation enough until some sort of authority showed up? Am I a little bitch? From Australia. Man, there's quite a bit in here. I'll start with no. You're not a little bitch. You watched something play out, and I think you went through a realistic and appropriate risk versus potential reward thought process / decision-making process, which is exactly what I would recommend anybody in this type of situation do. There are those that will say you always need to jump in and do the right thing, which conceptually I agree with. But as you laid out, this situation could have potentially gotten out of hand. Not only was there more than one person, there was an external object that could have been introduced into this. Also, this was not a matter of life and death. You have to do a risk assessment. So I don't know if I would consider myself to be a capable guy, but I do think about situations like this. And when it comes to deciding whether or not to get involved in something like this, the best thing that you can do is that risk assessment. And risk assessment is something that is critical to military mission planning and actually getting approval for any plan that you may have inside of the military. This is something that I did for every operation that I conducted overseas. They could, be rated from low risk, medium, and high. And there's an approval authority associated with each one of those. Why? Because as the risk escalates, we need that decision point becoming higher up the chain of command. And we look at the most likely course of action. Then we look at the most deadly course of action. And we balance those among a variety of other factors to come up with the overall assessed risk of executing the combat operation. There are times, and it can be frequently, that a high-risk operation is going to be denied. Now, why would they do that? Why would a military commander deny a high-risk operation? Well, the easiest way to put it would be that the juice was not going to be worth the squeeze. A push bike, although it could be really shitty for that individual that you described, coming out from going into classes all day, and it might change his or her life that the bike isn't there and modify that day, or perhaps a short portion of their future while they refigure out transit to and from school. That sucks. You getting your head bashed in by a set of bolt cutters sucks more. So I would say in this instance, if it was just you and you were not able to maybe call to a higher level of care, the police or somebody at the university, or maybe you could have gotten a larger group of individuals that also saw this and wanted to actually take action, and you could have approached them together with superiority in numbers, I think you made the right decision. So, no, I don't think that you are a coward. Let's talk about jiu-jitsu here for a second. And I'm not going to try to belabor this point because I know people probably get tired of me talking about jiu-jitsu. But guess what? It's been a hugely impactful addition to my life. Physically, but probably more importantly, would be mentally. Two individuals with an external object, set of bolt cutters, which swung at your head, your face, your hand, your arm, your leg. It's going to cause some substantial damage. Even a glancing blow could be pretty serious. It's great that you train jiu-jitsu. I caution anybody from thinking jiu-jitsu is magic. I've heard it described as magic, and it can certainly seem like magic when you are using it against somebody who is untrained and doesn't have pretty linear approaches to their responses, and they're unpredictable, and they really just have no idea what it means to actually physically get your hands on somebody and fight like your life depends on it. Sure, it could seem like magic then. But if you train jiu-jitsu and the only thing that you have ever done is train jiu-jitsu against one opponent, introducing somebody else may take your very high-level jiu-jitsu game and drastically reduce whatever it is that you think you are capable of. A soccer kick to the face is a real thing. And that's going to be probably altercation ending regardless of the color of your belt and how long you've been training jiu-jitsu. Are there ways that you could manage that and you could focus on or favor certain positions that would probably give you a little bit more space and distance or keep your head and chest up so you could see what's going on? Sure. But there's risk associated with that. Also, fights, if you only train jiu-jitsu, I am never going to say that you're not preparing yourself for a confrontation where somebody grabs a hold of you, or where you get into a range where you can put your hands on somebody else. In the confrontations that I have ever been involved in, which for clarity I avoid at all costs, or the ones that I have been proximal to, maybe one of them started with like a headlock. The rest of them started at punching range. So jiu-jitsu is great, but if you get knocked the fuck out before you can get to a place where you are able to use your jiu-jitsu, it's not going to really do you any good. So what I'm trying to say is, hopefully you are adding some semblance of range controlling skills, striking, kicking, kickboxing, Muay Thai, whatever it may be, so you can control a variety of ranges and space to keep yourself safe. I just worry when people think that only going to the gym and practicing jiu-jitsu alone is going to get them through everything. I do believe that it will get you through a lot, but it's not going to get you through everything. It sucks that you had to deal with this, and I'm glad, though, that A, it wasn't a risk to life, limb, or eyesight, which are things that I would put that in the category. So let's switch this situation out. And maybe let's say it's two individuals. Maybe they wouldn't have a set of bolt cutters, because at this point you're watching something that would be a risk to somebody else's life, limb, or eyesight. At that point, when we start looking at things like that, I would say it's not that you would be a coward if you didn't take action, specifically physically involving yourself in what was going on, but you need to take an action of some kind. And I'd go back to getting a higher level of response on the scene, or recruiting more people to do something. Anything absent that life, limb, or eyesight, things can be replaced. Just about anything can be replaced. And that's why insurance exists for a lot of these things. But life cannot be replaced. So if there's a threat to those things, I think that action has to be taken. And this kind of leads me towards a question that was posed to me earlier this week. And it essentially was, what does it mean to be a man? Which is a very interesting question. And it ties into this because I believe, in my mind, and what I'm going to give you are some criteria of what I think every man should be able to do. I'm not trying to push this on anybody, but when somebody asked me this question, this is initially what I thought. So when it comes to being a man, every man needs to be capable of physical violence. I'm not saying they need to go out and look for reasons or situations to be violent or to become violent. I've actually found the more capable you are in violence, the less likely you are to be in those situations. But if you do not participate in the practice of increasing your ability to impart violence on somebody else, then you are going to be, at least, theoretically, in a position where you could be victimized. Because if you don't know what to do and you think you're going to fall back on being a game time player, the reality of real life is going to kick you right in the face, metaphorically and maybe even perhaps practically. And I don't want to see that happen. Every man needs to be capable of violence, but they should look for every single reason and every single avenue to not use it until that is the last resort. And when it reaches that point, you need to be as capable as humanly possible. Every man also needs to be able to save a life. The ability to be violent is one thing. More often than not, what I have encountered is that skill is great to have when you need it, but what I have needed more is the ability to help people out of shitty situations where they are hurt, whether it's a car wreck, or maybe you come up upon a fight and it has just ended and you've got people broken and bleeding on the ground. Maybe there were some tools, maybe there were some sharp things, maybe there were some pointy things flying through the air at thousands of feet per second, and now there are people leaking hydraulic fluid. Every man needs to also be able to sustain life. So it's the complete other end of the spectrum. Know how to stop bleeding. Know how to keep somebody alive until a higher level of care can get there. In doing that, and actually in doing both of these, on the violent side and on the life sustainment side, what you're probably going to learn is an enhanced ability to keep your emotions in check, and maintain logical and objective thought, both in environments that require violence and environments that require you helping other people out of the worst moments of their life. I've come across, I was just about to say I've come across quite a few car accidents. I haven't come across quite a few, but I've come across my fair share. The last one, and I think I might have talked about this on an episode, was with my sons. I was riding my motorcycle and they were behind me in my truck, and a car got smashed by a semi-truck directly in front of me. I was actually the car behind the semi. I couldn't believe it was actually happening. The car came to a stop. The semi-truck actually, I think he hit it with the front left wheel, and it started this left-hand turn and went into the side of a building. And it hit the bathroom where a man was sitting on the toilet. He was fine, but that's one of the most amazing aspects of this story in my mind, because imagine sitting down on a toilet, minding your own business, doing your own thing, and surprise, cockbag, semi-truck through the wall. I digress. My point in maintaining control of your emotions and objective thought. I pulled my motorcycle off to the side of the road. I popped my helmet off, and I started walking over to the vehicle, the smaller vehicle that had been hit by the semi-truck. Before I had even got there, people ran up to the vehicle, ripped the door open, and yanked this woman out of the car. There was yelling from multiple people, screaming from multiple people. There were people out there filming with their phones. There was multiple people on the phone with EMS. So then I went over to the semi-truck. Semi-truck driver had already gotten out. I turned off the semi-truck, turned off the other vehicle, and realized that there was basically nothing that I could do in that situation that was going to make the situation any better. So I got my boys back in the truck, I got back on the motorcycle, and I left after ensuring that at least visually both people were doing okay. By the time I was able to even get there, like I had mentioned, people were already losing their minds. Those people losing their minds were doing absolutely nothing to help the people that were now inside of a crisis. Anybody who knows anything about traumatic injury is going to know that what you do not do is run up to a vehicle, rip the door open, and rip somebody out of the car, right? Let's just say that there is a small spinal cord injury that could be extremely exacerbated by that movement. The vehicle was not at risk of being on fire. It was not at risk of blowing up. It wasn't pouring fluids or gasoline anywhere. And all of the airbags had gone off, so it was a modern era vehicle. The person inside was definitely shaken up. But there's more risk in ripping them out of the vehicle than assessing the situation, maintaining your objective viewpoint of what's going on, maintaining control of your emotions, ensuring that that person is okay, and initiating a 911 call to update EMS to get the people out there who are going to have to clean up this mess. But you don't have to escalate the crisis. The crisis is in and of itself enough. Realistic training that you're going to get if you actually pursue this ability to sustain life is going to help you round the edges when it comes to these situations, because hopefully you'll encounter situations where those emotions, they kind of take over and your objective reasoning decreases, your ability to communicate decreases, and you'll actually realize, damn, I'm failing in this situation because of what I'm allowing my emotions to do. I'm allowing my emotions to lead as opposed to leading them and keeping them where they need to be, which is in check, so you can be objective. It's going to help you on both ends of that spectrum. There's a lot of other things that I think it requires to be a man, but those two stuck out to me the most. Violence, the ability to take a life, and the ability to save a life would be the easiest way to describe it. Just because you have the ability to take a life doesn't mean that you should. Just because you have the ability to be violent doesn't mean that you should, for the exact reasons that I've already covered in this question. What you observed was not a risk to life, limb, or eyesight. Are there things that you still could have done? Yes. But at the end of the day, let's keep it in perspective. Let's do this risk assessment and realize, was the juice worth the squeeze? In the end of the day, it wasn't. And we could change things about this that could potentially change my answer as to what you could have done and when you should have done it. But I would say, don't be so hard on yourself. Perhaps look at this situation as something that you can learn from. And think about war game, think tank in your own head, other options that you could have taken. I think that is a great exercise for people to do often. What would I do if is a great question to ask yourself. And you'll realize that there is a lot of pattern recognition in that. Like, oh, what would I do if this happened? What would I do if that happened? And you realize that they share about 80% of the solution. So now you've already mentally thought through a lot of the things that you would do. So if it comes up in real life, you have the ability to go do that, and you're probably going to feel like you are much more prepared. So no, I don't even know how long I just rambled on that. You are not a little bitch. Spend some time thinking about yourself, what you would have wanted changed, what you could have done, and I think you're going to be okay. Learn from it. Question 2. I'm 23 years old. I'm doing everything I can to better myself in life. When the pandemic hit, I went through a handful of personal challenges that brought me to a headspace I never want to return to. So I saved my money, changed my habits, moved to a new city, and by the end of 2020, and now have a clear picture of goals I plan to smash in the near future. A little backstory. I'm number 3 of 4 brothers. My oldest brother passed away at the age of 31 due to a drug overdose when I was 16 years old. He abused many substances, and it left a mark on me and my brothers forever. Now that we're all adults, I'm left with a challenge involving my older brother. He's 27 years old and hasn't attempted to move out of the house for any reason since he graduated high school in 2012. My parents will say and do nothing to encourage him to leave. He off and on gets motivated to go do good activities, but always goes back to his normal daily habits of smoking weed, playing video games, drinking, and consuming food that is horrible for your body, slowly gaining more and more weight. All while having no plan to move out and take care of himself. I've never had a sit down with him at all about my concerns. Everything inside of me wants to tell him, wake the fuck up and do something with yourself. Obviously, that's not the way to handle this. He's my brother, and I love him dearly. I truly don't want him to go down the same path as our older brother and be dead by 31. That pain was unbearable. I'm doing the best I can to show him a better path with the life I live now. And I often check in on him asking, hey, is everything okay? But he always responds with, yep, when I know he's not okay. I feel that I have to at least at some point in our lives talk to him about my concerns as his brother. I know I can't change anybody but myself, but it also feels wrong to not say anything at all. My question is, how should I handle this? Should I invite him to get a coffee and talk about this? And if so, how should I approach the conversation? Whew. All right, I am going to start with your parents on this one. Your parents will say and do nothing to encourage him to leave. Your parents are obviously not part of the solution here. Your parents are part of the problem. For any parents out here that may be listening to this, who you feel like you're creating a better life for your child or sheltering your life from the harsh realities of the world or trying to protect them or whatever self-justification that you would like to say to yourself in the mirror that would allow this type of behavior from one of your very adult children who is obviously expressing no desire to leave, and you are in no way, shape, or form trying to either build the foundation for those habits or facilitate opportunities other than what they are doing, or let's take it to the extreme spectrum here, lay down the law and say, hey, here's the deal. If you want to live here, you need to do this, this, and this, or you're fucking out of here because guess what? You're 27 years old. If you're not doing any of those things, you're not protecting your kids. You're not saving them from the outside world. You're setting them up for failure, right? At the age of 27 years old, and you're still living at home, and you're playing video games and smoking weed, drinking and eating a ton of food that is allowing you to gain more and more weight, and you as the parents are passively sitting there and watching that and doing nothing, you are 100% part of the problem and not part of the solution. You should be ashamed of yourself for allowing that to happen and not addressing it directly. Yeah, I understand. It's your kid. But the best thing that you could ever do for your kids is actually prepare them for life outside of the nest. Emphasis on outside of the nest. All right, now, to the individual that wrote this. First off, I'm sorry to hear about your brother at the age of 31. That's incredibly rough. And at the age of 16, I can only imagine losing a sibling at that age and the impact that it probably would have on the remainder of your life, like you briefly touched on in the email. My question to you is this. How long are you going to wait to have this conversation? I think you've identified that the conversation, it needs to happen. Do you want to wait until it's past the point of no return? And ask yourself this, what's going to be more painful? Having a conversation that you know will be difficult, that you know is going to challenge the status quo for your brother, that may impact the interpersonal relationship that you have for a little bit, or getting a phone call saying that he's dead because he was unable or unwilling to change his behaviors. Which one of those would hurt you more? Hopefully it's the former, not the latter. Because if the worst thing that, if you get that call and you didn't do anything, I'm going to tell you right now what you're going to live with is regret every day for the rest of your life because you know you needed to do something and you didn't. So don't even put that as an option on the table. What you need to do is, as soon as possible, you need to go sit down and talk with your brother. Asking people, hey, is everything okay? From somebody who's been asked that question, when things in my life are absolutely not okay, when everything feels like it's not okay, what do you think my response was? Yep, doing good. So I understand not only the question, but the person giving the answer when that answer is anything but true. If you know he's not doing okay, stop asking that question and start asking different ones. And I can't give you a list of what those should be, but I would maybe open the conversation with, hey man, first off, before I talk about opening the conversation, I don't know if I would have this conversation with your brother over coffee. I'm not saying that you can't do it outside of the home. I probably would recommend doing it outside of his comfort zone, but I don't know if I would do it in a public setting where there's a lot of other people around, because this could actually get pretty heated or passionate. So I would maybe recommend go for a walk. I don't know where you live, but maybe on the beach or whatever it may be, somewhere where you're outside, but you're not within sight of earshot, because this conversation, it may not be the best. Hopefully it could lead to the best outcome, but it's going to be difficult. And I wouldn't open with, hey man, how you doing? Is everything okay? I would probably, if this was me, I would say, hey, I know you keep telling me that everything is okay, but I love you. I love having you in my life. And one of the worst things that happened to me up to this point in my life is getting the information or the call that our brother died of a drug overdose. And I am incredibly concerned about you and where I think you are headed. And the last thing that I want to do is get that same type of phone call about you. You need to base this conversation in love, not in judgment. So I would open it from that perspective. Having said that, he may absolutely push back on everything that you have to say, tell you to go fuck yourself, and not want to have anything to do with you for a while. That's okay. Be prepared for that. To go back to the last question, what does it mean to be a man? Being a man is doing what needs to be done, not doing what you want to do. This, it sounds like, needs to be done. And I don't doubt that you don't want to do it. Well, too bad, right? You are going to step up to the plate and you are going to try to reach into your brother's life because you care about him. One thing I think that people often forget is that these situations don't occur overnight. In my experience with them, they happen an ounce at a time until an ounce or the ounces become pounds. Those pounds become tens of pounds. Those tens of pounds become hundreds of pounds. And momentum gets trending in the wrong direction. So your brother's probably, he's slowly gaining more and more weight. So he's trending towards being overweight. He's got a very passive physical activity, if any, drinking and smoking. I'll leave the video games because, play video games if you want to. Don't play video games if you don't. It's probably not the most productive use of your time at 27 living at home, and it doesn't sound like he has a job. So if he's been at these behaviors for a long time, drastic shifts in his life are not going to do a 180 on all of these. It's going to be slow, incremental changes that will be held over time. If it takes you 2 to 3 years to gain 100 pounds, I see people set these unrealistic expectations that they're going to shed that weight in 2 weeks. Or, this January 1st is the month and I'm going to get rid of all of this. That's just not the reality of how this works. So be realistic in what you would like the impact to be of this conversation. Maybe he will recognize exactly what you're saying, and he is going to want to change all of these behaviors. If he goes that route, which I hope that he does, please be on standby to assist and help out and be there for support, because these are a lot of ingrained behaviors that is going to take some time to get that momentum going in the other direction. And that's the best advice that I can give you. You put it right here in your email. He's my brother, and I love him dearly. Treat him like that. I can't imagine anything worse than living the rest of your life knowing that you could have at least tried something, but didn't, and then lost the opportunity to do so. So find the time and place to do this, and then get it done. Next question. This question has two parts. One, what's the prevalence of steroid use in the SEAL teams? This is an easy one for me to answer. I have absolutely no idea. There are some SEALs, and again, I can only speak on my own. I will answer this question for the perspective of what I saw with my own eyes. I have no data to support this. Everything I'm saying is completely anecdotal. I don't speak for the SEAL teams. This is just what I personally experience. Prevalence of steroid use in the SEAL teams. Does it exist, steroid use? Yes, it does. I would say it's the drastic minority. And that's the best way that I can answer that. Is it present? Yes. Is it ever present? No. Number two, why would the military limit the ability for their elite warriors to enhance their physical and or mental capabilities if it would enhance them on the battlefield? Many countries over the course of history have used chemicals to enhance their soldiers' abilities to gain any advantage over the enemy. Wouldn't it be logical that America would do the same? Well, just because other countries do something does not mean that the United States of America should, nor does it mean that it is logical that America would just repeat behaviors blindly because other countries did. Most people join the military late in their teens. For myself, I was in boot camp when I was 18 and then into the SEAL community before I was 20. So let's go to steroid use. I'm not a medical expert by any stretch of the imagination. And from my knowledge, though, steroid use at that age probably going to have some long-term health consequences, of course, depending on how you would cycle on and off. But it's pretty early in life to start messing with those hormones. Now, again, from my non-medical perspective, I've heard a lot of people talk about hormone replacement therapy, which I think is still largely some of the same chemicals when people refer to steroids, but it's applied differently at lower dosages over time, and you're really trying to stave off the effects of aging. But for men, you get into your late 30s and 40s, a lot of these chemicals their production naturally in the body, rightly so, due to aging, they're going downhill, not uphill. That's the point in time where adding these things, I think, would make a little bit more sense. I don't think it'd be a great idea to do that to people super early on in their growth curve of their life. And in addition, something you have to think about here, and I have heard of people talking before at one of the military commands that I was at. They were considering a medically administered steroid cycle for the individuals for, kind of the reasons that you mentioned. It's an enhancement for their soldiers to gain an advantage over the enemy. So specifically, I'm talking about steroids and HGH. And the reason that they landed on not wanting to do that, it wasn't from the physical concerns. It was more that if they administered this medically, right? So you got a guy in a lab coat who is giving you the shots, I guess, and managing your blood work, and they see an increase or a difference that they don't want to let go of, and that treatment ends, what's going to happen then? Are the guys going to stop because the doctor's like, okay, well, the trial's over and, go back to whatever it was? And the answer that they landed on, and I agree with them on this, is that no, it likely wouldn't stop. And at that point, these individuals would be seeking out this on their own. So it was more I don't know if addiction is the right term, but it was more the mental attachment to what could potentially come from this than it was the physical enhancements that could come from it. And one outweighed the other. And I agree with that. I think that if you legally allowed SEALs to take steroids and it was an option and they could go in and a doctor could just do whatever it is they want to do, I think a lot of guys, I can't say most, but I think a lot of guys, when it got to a point where a doc was like, hey, cool, well, we're done now, I think it'd be an issue. So I think at least the command at that time, I think they made the right decision. But that's just my own experience. Steroids on the battlefield, is it going to help you be a little bit stronger? Maybe. Is it going to help you gain weight? Probably. Is it going to have more muscle mass and all these things? Yeah, but there's downsides. So if you added 20 pounds of lean muscle, you still got to oxygenate that muscle. And you go to a country that has a baseline elevation in some places of 8,000 to 10,000 feet, you don't want to be carrying that additional 20 pounds. You actually want to be lighter. So it's not this magic recipe that solves all problems. There's as much downside as there is up. So that's where I land on steroids, steroid usage, and enhancement of soldiers in the United States military. That's it. See you guys Monday.
The west bank of the river. That's A firm, west bank. It gives me hell. Still give it to me in the grove. Okay, one's in from the north. I've got the west bank of the river. Two's going to give it to you in the grove. Roger, give me that gun run. Right along that bag, baby.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Thanks for taking the time to tune in, whether you're listening on an audio-only platform or you're watching on YouTube. I appreciate that you take the time every week to tune in. People ask me a lot, what can they do to help me spread the word? And the answer is actually embedded in the question. The biggest thing you guys can do to help me, if you enjoy the podcast and you think it would be helpful to others, is subscribe and share it with other people. And if you have the time, go on to Apple Podcasts and leave me a rating and a review. If you think the podcast sucks, tell me it sucks and leave a 0-star review or the lowest stars possible. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion, you can go to clearedhotpodcast.com. And there is a contact me button right there, which will land in my inbox. And the last thing, if people are interested in helping out, what you can do is fly the old flag. And by that, I don't mean an actual flag, because I don't have any of those. I'm talking about t-shirts or sweatshirts or hats, whatever it may be. Again, clearedhotpodcast.com. Click on the shop tab, and hopefully something in there looks like it would be an item you would like to wear around town. And then you can tell people what it is when they ask you. But that is it. The biggest thing I can say is thank you. I truly appreciate it. And until next time, see you.